Aloha and welcome to Ehana Kako. We're a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute. Have you ever wondered why is housing so expensive here in the state of Hawaii? Or why do we see so many homeless? Why is it so hard to find affordable homes? And where can you find a rental so that your kids, once they graduate from college, can get started here in this city rather than somewhere else in the United States? Well, there's a man who knows the answer to these questions, but he's got more than what we call knowledge. He also has a tremendous heart. He's been very successful in the real estate and construction development business, but he cares passionately about putting common, average, middle class, and poor individuals into homes. I'm talking about the president and CEO of Stanford Carr Development, and he's with us today. Stanford, aloha, welcome to the program.
Aloha, Keli'i. Thank you for having me here.
Well, it's great talking with you because I know we share a heartbeat for the least advantaged in society.
Yes.
You know, when people think about a developer at your level in terms of the kinds of projects that you have worked on, the income level and so forth, the investment, they don't necessarily think about homelessness. They think about being as insulated and far away from the homeless problem at all, as far as you could be. But that's not the case with you, is it?
No, I mean, we have a skill set to do what we do, and we're very passionate of what we develop and autograph our work in each of our projects, whether it be a transitional homeless shelter all the way to luxury resort housing.
Let me ask you some questions about our housing market here in Hawaii. The obvious one, the sticker shock people get when they come here. Why is housing so expensive?
It's the basics, economics 101.
Supply and demand.
Supply, demand, and scarcity.
That's right. So there's a scarcity of land, but you know when you fly over the islands, or when you go out to the Ewa Plains,
Yes.
or if you look at some of the flat places on neighbor islands that are no longer used for agriculture, it doesn't look like land is all that scarce. So is there something causing this virtual scarcity?
Sure, it's the regulatory process. The regulatory barriers on both the county levels to the state levels. So this is over years. Ever since the creation of the Land Use Commission, production of housing has continued to go down while prices continue to go up.
I've talked to a good number of developers as well as government officials, and it seems that we don't develop urbanization, housing, and so forth on more than 2.5% to 3% of the entire landmass. Does that sound right to you?
That is correct. Less than 4% of our land is urbanized.
What if we developed on just a tiny bit more, another 0.5%? Would that destroy the environment here?
We don't even have to go that far, Keli'i. What we need to do is be smart about how we utilize our land. Efficiency, because land is a precious commodity, and because of scarcity, that we be smart in what we develop, where we developed, to look towards long-term growth, because you need to accommodate family formations and growth, or it'll cause what you see today. The results is the high cost of housing, high cost of rents, in outpacing people's incomes.
Now, when we're talking about meeting the need, we're actually talking about different kinds of housing. You mentioned transitional housing, rental housing. What are the different kinds of housing that we actually need to develop here in Hawaii?
What we see today with homelessness throughout our state, people leaving our state because of the cost of living, cost of housing, to have a better lifestyle elsewhere because of primarily the cost of housing. And it's a direct correlation with the lack of housing inventory in both rental housing inventory.
Rental housing, okay.
And home ownership.
Home ownership.
Correct.
But there are also other things that are needed, such as transitional housing for the homeless.
Well, we need to address that issue, which is very prevalent in our community today, is the homelessness. And the homelessness is a direct result because rents have outpaced people's incomes. You know, as today in 2015, rents have gone up 15% in comparison to 2014.
That's
so it comes down to the decision that people have to make a decision. Do I, put food on a table or have a home or roof over my head? And they usually move into a family or friends' residences until the pressures of a multi-generational family causes the pressures that they leave, they vacate, because they don't want to be, encumbering on friends
Sure.
and family. They live in their car, and eventually they find shelter elsewhere along the streets. And so we do need to address transitional just to get them off the streets, because the social cost and equitableness that we see today are going to be much more costly exponentially down the road if we
Yes.
don't address this issue today.
Developers such as yourself have made the offer to government to work together to create more affordable housing, both in terms of what can be purchased as well as what can be rented. And really, I wanted to ask you to help enlighten our viewers on the business of affordable housing. Why is it that when we say as a people, as a government, we're going to have more affordable housing, frequently in some places like on Maui, 10 years later, there isn't any? What is the business of, what goes into being able to create public-private partnerships for affordable housing?
Well, you bring up a good point, the three Ps. It's going to take public-private partnerships in that collaboration in order to create the necessary housing inventory, both in rentals as well as for sale home ownership.
So what actually has to happen? What has to come into place in order for us to see affordable housing developed?
So first of all, you have to define affordable. Because
Okay, very good.
What's affordable to one family may not be affordable to another.
Absolutely.
And we usually speak in our line of business, the lingo is by area median incomes. And that's established by HUD annually
All right.
by county throughout our country. So we usually speak in terms of the median. And so the median is 100% AMI based on a family of 4 households.
All right.
But to find out each of the 4 county median incomes, you just go to HUD or Housing, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and each of the counties within our state has the established published median incomes.
So we begin with an average medium income.
We begin with that, and so we start working our way down below low income.
All right.
And that would be usually at households earning 60% of the area median income.
Okay.
So for Oahu, that would be a single person making $41,000 a year.
All right.
Or a family of 4, a couple with 2 children, making a household income of $57,000 a year. And so on that basis, their rent that they pay towards their roof overhead, their head, including utility costs, is 30% of their adjusted gross income. For that single person, it would mean a 1-bedroom apartment for $1,000 a month.
Okay, so that would be a model of an affordable unit.
Correct. Affordable rental housing unit.
Okay. Now, how does government work to give an incentive to a developer to move forward and develop affordable units?
So I think I like to use Halekauwila, our most recent
right.
completed family rental project located in Kaka'ako. It's a 19-story high-rise building with 268 parking stall structure. And we have a number of studios, 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units, predominantly 2-bedroom units for families.
All right.
And our rents there are from $900 for a studio up to $1,389 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home.
Now, is the entire project affordable homes?
Yes. The
Okay.
entire
So it's
100% of our tenants. I like to say that 100% of our tenants represent 80% of our workforce.
Now, over the years, and just reading the newspapers and watching TV, being in Hawaii, a layperson in development, I've been under the impression that most affordable home construction is a blend of market rate homes and affordable units. Is that the case, or?
It can be, if a developer chooses to do such. We've just broke ground last week on Halekauwila Place. It's a 423-unit condominium project, of which 85 units, 20% of the units being built in that project, are set aside for families earning between 100% to 140% of the area median income. So those families are buying units from $357,000 to just up to $500,000 for first-time buyers.
So let's go back to your 100% affordable project.
Correct.
What was your incentive for doing this? Could you have made more money in a different way?
Definitely. I mean, to build this project, we could have built condominiums. However, Halekauwila Place was a project and a challenge that we took upon ourselves. There was a competitive RFP put out by the Hawaii Housing Finance Development Corporation, a state agency that we've done business with now for about 28 years. And it was for the purpose of developing a rental project. Previously, they were thinking of doing senior rentals. We challenged ourselves to do a 204-unit family rental, 100% affordable, utilizing a program called Section 42 of the IRS Code. It's called the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program.
Right.
And it was established in the 1986 Tax Reform Act for the construction of rental housing throughout our country. We utilized that program for the sale of federal and state tax credits and augmented the financing, what is called a HUD 221D4, tax-exempt bond financing. So we use these different financing tools to construct and develop this housing project.
And would
here.
you say at this point, basically, that's a successful project?
Very successful.
At what stage is it now?
We're
Is it
100%
completed?
occupied.
All right.
We broke ground in the project in January of 2013. We completed the project in April of 2014.
Was that on time?
It was 2 months ahead of schedule.
2 months ahead of schedule. So now here's my question, because this is quite a remarkable accomplishment. How did it happen? Why did it happen that this managed to succeed?
It came about by the again, it's the public-private partnership. I mean, this is a case study to exemplify that more of these types of projects can be built, not only in high-rise, but in 2- and 3-story form construction. So we collaborate with our design team, our engineers, our architects, our contractor to do a design assist build.
Now, was it the government that drove this project? Was it the private sector that drove this project?
It was the private sector that drilled this project, that drove it, with the assistance and collaboration with government, with both city and state assistance.
Now I'm hearing something from you that is very different from what we've heard over the past several years. In talking with developers and others, there's more of a lamenting about the fact that it's almost impossible to build affordable homes on time, scheduled, and in some cases we don't even have those developments as on the island of Maui after 10 years. So what has been the general problem? And are we still facing that regulatory environment?
We need to break down the impediments. You know, it was fortunate that Halekauwila was being processed and we financed it probably during one of the worst economic times in a recession. If you recall, 2012, it was a bleak outlook on our economic outlook. High unemployment. In fact, there wasn't even a huge appetite in the business community to buy federal tax credits. We were fortunate that PNC Bank, the 5th largest bank in the country, that doesn't even do business here in Hawaii, was very interested in doing Halekauwila. And they invested $23.5 million in purchasing those federal tax credits. So that's $23.5 million that was imported to Hawaii, the state, to help construct Halekauwila Place, a $71 million, 204-unit, 100% workforce rental project here in the urban core of Kaka'ako. That money could have been invested in some other state, but they chose to invest here in Hawaii because they recognized the need for workforce rentals in Hawaii and that it was a good investment. The risks were very low in comparison to investing that same money, say, in the state of Nebraska or Idaho. And so we're very fortunate to attract that kind of capital to Hawaii to create housing inventory that'll be good for our community for the next 100 years. We need to do more of this.
Your company has played the role of a champion, though. It's not just that this was an easy thing to do. It required, as we said earlier, it required the private sector to actually drive this and so forth.
That is correct. It's going to take more than the private sector. It takes the private sector, again, the 3 Ps, public-private partnerships. I can't say that enough. You know, government's got to let the private sector, private industry, entrepreneurism take the lead, but we can't do it without the assistance and the collaboration with the city and the state, both the county and state, in providing us the necessary tools that we need in order to effectuate these business plans.
You know, when I come back from this short break, I'm going to ask you a question. Looking at the need in Hawaii to build affordable housing, I'm going to ask you how long it's going to take. I believe our governor recently said it may take 5 years or more. I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. We'll be right back in a moment. This is Keli'i Akina talking with Stanford Carr. It's fascinating. I have to tell you, usually when we're talking about economic topics here in Hawaii, we end on a little bit of a sad note as we look at some of the challenges we're facing. But this is a great story of how public-private partnerships are meeting a real need, and that we are and can develop affordable housing. We'll hear more from Stanford Carr when we come back after this short break.
Hi, I'm Chris Leatham, and I'd like to invite you to come and watch my show every Wednesday at 3. I'm interested in a variety of issues that have to do with politics and our local business economy. And I'd like to bring on guests who like to talk about everything from technology to social media to what we can be doing to improve our environment. And so I'd like to invite you every Wednesday at 3 to stay and watch my show here with ThinkTech Hawaii. And I'll see you there.
Hi, my name is Cindy Matsuki, and I host High Growth with HTDC, where we talk about all things tech, innovation, entrepreneurship, and manufacturing, because there are tons of things that are happening in Hawaii in those fields, and we like to share them with you because more people should know about them. This show broadcasts live every other Tuesday at 3 o'clock on ThinkTech Hawaii, and tune in, and we'll see you then. Thank you.
Welcome back to Ehana Kako, here every week on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. Ehana Kako, that's what we say at the Grassroots Institute. Have you heard that venerable old saying, e pule kako, let's pray together? Well, at Grassroots Institute, we also say Ehana Kako, which means let's work together. Let's work together for a better economy, a better government, a better society. Think of the alternative. If we don't work together, well, we can't afford that alternative. My guest today, Stanford Carr, is a master of bringing people together to work together to build a better Hawaii, and that's what we're talking about today. Stanford, before the break, I asked you, how long do you think it will take to meet Hawaii's need for affordable housing? As I mentioned earlier, our governor thinks it'll take about 5 or 6 years to get started in a credible plan. You're a seasoned developer. What are your thoughts?
Well, we have started we've broken ground on projects 6 months after acquiring the land. So it's a matter of cutting through the regulatory issues to obtaining our permits in order to execute and start building.
Well, it sounds like the role government could really play would be to get out of the way.
Absolutely. You know, and the building community all want to help and contribute towards this end, and for the creation of more entry-level rentals as well as for sale home ownership. And there's builders on the neighbor islands that want to do their part. We recently all got together. There's a strong willingness to help. We're in a very crisis situation. Sometimes it has to get to this extent where there's a wake-up call and everybody's willing to pitch in and help.
You have to deal a lot with public perception as a developer, and whenever a development is announced and launched and so forth, there's always that component of those who will object to it for a variety of reasons, whether they are promoting environmentalism or perhaps there's a religious side for my fellow Native Hawaiians or whatever it is. What's it like being a developer here in this kind of environment?
Well, one of the things we do is we reach out to the community when we're proposing to look at any development and to address people's concerns, the neighborhood, the community, on all issues, whether it be traffic, what we're building, to talk about it. And that's a practice we've done for over 20 somewhat years. We continue to do that. We're not always going to satisfy everyone. In fact, we still have litigation going on some of our projects that people are appealing, despite the fact that we've gotten all the entitlement approvals. That'll follow its normal course of the judiciary process. But you know, we continue to be steadfast because there is the demand and the need for housing in all brackets.
Did growing up and beginning your business on the island of Maui give you any unique lessons that you've taken with you as you've expanded statewide?
Well, you know, I grew up on a farm up in Kula.
Okay.
And being a farmer is probably got a lot more correlation of being a real estate developer than any other profession, because in a farm, what you put into it is what you get out of it. Mm-hmm. And you may not necessarily reap all the benefits because you're dealing with a commodity and you're susceptible to the weather, like you are to interest rates, to economic cycles, as you are to diseases. So there are forces beyond your control that could determine the outcome of all the hard work that you put into either a crop or a project.
And then again, there is all this diversity. You have to be a jack of all trades, really, to bring together everything from the scientific to the social, all in one package. And there are calendars, there's timetables that have to be met.
Yeah, it's what makes it uniquely attractive is the challenge. And every day is a new day. But we love what we do. You know, it's funny, most people don't know this, but when I was 14, I testified against a project before the Maui Planning Commission in the in the Red Dragon Room at Maui Beach Hotel. A group of mainland developers were proposing to build a hotel on McKenna Beach, and there was a favorite place of when we were kids to go camping and diving, and I went before the Maui Planning Commission to testify that we've got AA marine life water, meaning we've got endangered species in these waters at McKenna, and testified against the hotel zoning.
So you can understand some of the people who protest against you.
Absolutely. I mean, but you know, there's a difference between preserving natural resources and the necessity for providing housing necessary for household formation and population growth. Because if you don't provide that necessary housing, you're going to have an imbalance.
Well, how do we strike that balance? You see, on one hand, we want to preserve the environment as much as possible and protect it. Malama the Aina, that is so very important. On the other hand, we want to care for human need, and the most crucial need of all is to get people into housing. At times, of course, they seem to be at odds with each other. So what's your philosophy of how these interact and how we balance the two?
There needs to be balance. You need to be very sensitive as to the environment, the neighborhoods. You need to do long-range planning to ensure that there is sufficient infrastructure to support urban growth and development. On Oahu, we need to be smarter, as with rail is coming online, is being constructed from Kapolei to Ala Moana. We should be proactive right now, identifying the transit stations to see that, ensure that there's future capacity for sewer, water, drainage in order to create more housing around these stations so that you'll encourage the connectivity and accessibility for people to live on the outskirts and commute to town, and likewise for people who live in town that need to commute out to the suburbs for their work.
On the island of Maui, we've seen a lot of dynamics at play between environmentalists and developers. We've seen the GMO controversy as well there.
Yes.
And now we're seeing obstruction or at least protest to the building of the Dan Inouye telescope, similar to the protests on the Big Island. When you look at the island of Maui and its need for affordable housing, what has been the problem on Maui with even getting started in any significant way?
I think it's education, and sometimes people are confused. GMO has been around for decades. It was called biotechnology. The farmers up in Kula worked closely with the University of Hawaii Agricultural Extension to come up with hybrids of vegetables or produce that are less susceptible to different diseases. That today is called GMO. Maui is the last island that still has a viable sugarcane operation.
Yes.
And yet the environmentalists there want to stop burning cane. It's the only island in the entire state that still grows sugar. Can you imagine flying into the Central Plains to Kalu Airport and there was no cane? What those green fields would look like without cane? It would look like a desert. We still, after decades, since the beginning of the demise of sugar and price supports, that slowly we've lost over 100 plus sugar mills throughout our state, have never come up with an economically viable industrial agricultural product that has export value that we can grow. Over 200 somewhat thousand acres that was formerly cultivated in sugar or pineapple are growing fallow today. So I believe that, you know, with when Monsanto and Pioneer coming in to create an industry for seed corn, that's great. It's fantastic. We welcome that. With respect to the telescope, you know, we need more high-paying, clean energy jobs. And if people don't want to lose our keiki to leave for college and never come back because of the cost of housing and the cost of living, we'll never be able to change the cost of living. We import so much of what we consume. Housing is the one handicap that we can shore up. We have a control over housing, and we need to build more of it. We need to have more public-private partnerships to create and satisfy the housing demands and the needs of our community in both rental as well as home ownership. And if we start there, we can maybe make a difference here.
On the island of Maui, you've already spoken about this when we did a radio interview. One of the problems in moving forward with affordable housing and development is the water situation, because now the government finds itself almost conflicted on two sides, saying, let's have more development here, but we're not going to do what's needed to clear the water rights and so forth. What's the situation on Maui?
So Maui there's been a water bill that was adopted in 2006 that for any development, they will not process unless you have your own source of water. And if you don't, you have to develop your own wells, source wells. Now, the only projects that can afford or have the economies of scale to spend $2.5 million to do an exploratory well, test it, get approvals, and outfit it, including building storage, transmission lines, which is what the Department of Water Supply,
That's right.
the government exists. That agency exists for that purpose.
To facilitate, that's why it exists.
Correct. You can't.
But it ends up obstructing.
Absolutely.
See, the draconian efforts needed to get through all of the hoops, to get the permits, to do the environmental assessment and so forth, seem to be stacked completely against reasonable sized developments.
That is correct, and that's why you don't see much being built. I mean, what you saw built more recently was timeshare at the Hyatt in Kahanapali, and they're currently building resort condos in Kahana. But that's because they're using a private water source, Kahanapali water, that was a byproduct of what was once upon a time AMFAC.
So what does a developer who wants to build affordable housing on Maui do? What do you pay off? I'm not suggesting this because I'm on the air, but we don't pay off politicians. I mean, is it a political problem? Is it reaching out to the general public? How do we cut through this red tape?
I believe it
situation?
starts with political will.
Okay.
The council adopted this ordinance. It's going to take the council to unwind this ordinance. Councilman Mike Victorino is now spearheading to amend this bill to exempt any project 10 units or less. Well, 10 units is a small little subdivision. That's not going to make a significant impact.
That's right.
And so, it's going to be the constituency of Maui, speaking to their representative of their district and the council as a whole to repeal this bill altogether.
And it goes back to what you talked about earlier, education overall for everyone, and not only of the people, but also policymakers. But we have to get involved too. If it's a political process, then how do we move forward when so few people actually register and then show up to vote?
That's been a problem. It's been the apathy that hasn't helped what has transpired. And so, as I say, if you don't vote, no grumble, right? Well,
right. But we hear a lot of grumbling.
We hear a lot of grumbling, and so you've got to start walking the talk. Get involved. And I know the difficulty for many families is that they're working secondary, tertiary jobs. They don't have the time during the normal work hours to go before the council or the planning commission to testify. There are many privileged people that have and afford the time, and it's usually been the activists that are anti.
You're suggesting then that the protest is not really coming from a groundswell of the grassroots.
Correct. I believe there's a silent majority there that would say otherwise, that have not had the ability to come out because they're working 2-3 jobs.
That's right. And we saw that with the GMO issue, both on Kauai and on Maui, that common folk who worked on farms and depended upon produce for their stores and so forth, realized that they would be hurt severely if government stood against GMOs in a way that was not reasonable.
That's correct. I mean, we have to be very cognizant of the repercussions. Many of these initiatives are started with good intentions.
In our final segment in a moment when we return, I want to change our focus a bit to the overall economy here in the state of Hawaii. I'm talking with Stanford Carr, President and CEO of Stanford Carr Development, about affordable housing, the business of doing it, the government regulation, and when we come back, I'm going to ask him about his insights into Hawaii's future and economy. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this.
Aloha, my name is Roy Kodani, and every Wednesday at 1 p.m., I host Life in the Law, which is a segment of ThinkTech Hawaii. And basically, I host guests who have some relevancy to law in Hawaii. And I hope you will continue to tune in. If you have questions, tweet us at ThinkTech Hawaii. Mahalo.
Aloha! How you doing? It's me, Angus McTech, wishing you to welcome and join us to see us on Hibachi Talk on ThinkTech Hawaii. Join my co-hosts, Gordo the Tech Czar and Andrew the Security Guy, every Friday from 1300 to 1345. We look forward to seeing you. We'll talk tech and we'll have some wee bit of fun. And remember, let your wing gang free wherever you be. Aloha!
We go. Welcome back to E Halekauwila. We're here in our final segment of today's fascinating conversation with Stanford Carr. But I don't want to forget to say mahalo to the tremendous crew and the producers at ThinkTech Hawaii. Jay Fidel has put together a great organization that is producing about 30 to 35 hours of content every week that comes out of Hawaii and goes across the world. And you can access that content on ThinkTechHawaii.com. Now back to Stanford Carr. I want to, as we say here, look into your mana'o, your wisdom about Hawaii. You're a father. You've got 3 children, right?
3 children.
Patty and I have 4 children. 3 of our children are away, out of school. But it doesn't look like they're going to return to Hawaii and buy a home very soon. They're smart kids, and they're going to make a lot more money than me. And I think even your kids with a rich dad like you.
I don't know about rich.
Are they coming back to have a mortgage?
I'm hopeful. Kathy and I are hopeful. And I think that's a concern everyone here in Hawaii has. Their children leaving to go off to college and having the ability to attain a career here back at home and yet be able to afford to live here.
That's right. And you know, there's nothing wrong. In fact, it's wonderful that we have children who can go across the world, gain experience, get education, and so forth. But the problem is many of them can't come back and make a living here because of the job market, the kinds of jobs available, and the housing market and the cost of living. What have you seen in the past several years in terms of the cost of living here in Hawaii and the ability to live here as a professional?
Well, being born and raised here in Hawaii and not living anywhere else my entire life, and I have no plans to ever live anywhere else, I've always tried to, hey, how do we make this a better place? Mm-hmm. And it comes back to, and we've been saying this for decades, except we haven't walked the talk, is we need to diversify our economic engines here. You know, we've got all the God-given reasons why people want to live in Hawaii.
That's right.
And we've got all the other reasons why businesses aren't setting up shop here. So what that tells me is, hey, we've got a fighting chance. And I think what we need to do is, again, cut through the regulatory issues to allow and advocate for businesses to start up here, to recognize our handicaps. We'll always have the highest cost of living due to the fact that we need to import so much of what we consume. But we're making some great progress with renewable energies, using natural energy. We need to do more to advocate for other businesses. The 30-meter telescope is a prime example of the type of industries we need to be supporting. I'm serving now my 3rd term as a University of Hawaii trustee. Mm. And I remember serving the first term when Ken Mortimer was the president of the University of Hawaii.
How about that?
And the dean of astronomy came in and they gave us a presentation on our University of Hawaii competing for the 30-meter telescope against Chile. And back then, this is probably 15, 16 years ago, I said, we got to get this. You know, Hawaii needs this, because this is what's going to put us on the international map with respect to astronomy.
Well, Stanford, as you know, construction hasn't begun, and it's 7 months after all permits were in and the project was cleared. You recall what happened after the Super Ferry project was scuttled here in Hawaii. What
Yes.
will the impact be if the TMT project, $1.4 billion, 6 nations, 9 years in the making, what will the impact be if that doesn't go forward?
It'll be tragic. It'll cause irreparable damage as to having the international community or any investment community having any interest to do business in Hawaii. I think the Super Ferry, which would have been great for our state, to have that other choice of connectivity, you know, whether it be transporting goods or organized sports, for leisure, or any types of business, to transport equipment and goods and services to the neighbor islands. That sent a bad message to the investment world. The 30-meter telescope, everyone's watching. And it would be very tragic. It would cause irreparable damage for Hawaii's future to attract investment and capital to our state for technology, for the industries where we need growth to create higher paying jobs.
Government obviously plays a role in creating the investment climate here in Hawaii and has played a role in the fact that the construction is at a standstill for the TMT. Why is that? What is the problem here with our political leadership such that it creates a disincentive for investment?
Well, you know, everybody wants to get reelected, so they need to appease. You know, politics is a tough business. You're never going to appease everyone. Someone's not going to be happy. But you got to look at making decisions for the greater good of Hawaii. You know, again, you'll have vocal minorities that not necessarily represents the silent majority. So sometimes you see a small group making a lot of noise, but that's really not reflective of the greater community that does support it.
Do you think politicians tend to give more credit to tiny vocal minorities than really to the, as you mentioned earlier, the silent majority of people?
You know, sometimes it's the squeaky wheel that gets things done, right? You know, that's that old saying. But again, I think everyone needs to take a step back and really make decisions for the greater good of our community and our society, as well as our future. And be cognizant of the entire outside world is looking upon us as to how we resolve these conflicts and these issues and how we overcome them.
Stanford, at the Grassroot Institute, we're research partners with an organization in Canada called the Fraser Institute, and they publish the Economic Freedom of the World and Economic Freedom of North America reports. The new report is about to come out. And these reports measure the economic freedom of cities, states, and countries, by which we mean how much property rights is protected, how does the government interfere with or not interfere with the supply and demand in the market. Here's something that you might find interesting. Hawaii is now ranked below several states in Mexico for economic freedom.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all. Having been in business for 35 years now, you know, for years you hear about the rhetoric, we need to make it better, break down the regulatory issues. I've seen it only gotten worse.
Now, we're not only affected by regulatory issues, we're affected by the labor market, the role of the unions. We're affected by factors outside of Hawaii, such as federal laws. One I know you're familiar with, the shipping laws known as the Jones Act laws.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about that?
I think, you know, Hawaii and Alaska get caught up in national policies that should be sometimes kept to the 48 contiguous states, and they should exempt Hawaii, much like building codes. There will be, you know, our Hawaii and Alaska's environment is very different from that from California to Florida. And Hawaii should be exempted from some of these policies or codes that are adopted by Congress.
In other words, the other 48 states can weather some of the protectionism of the Jones Act, but Hawaii, because shipping is so vital to our very existence, we're surrounded by 360 degrees of water, we get hit big time like Puerto Rico.
Correct. I mean, we're the most isolated islands in the world. So we've got ships passing by us both east and west. So why does it have to necessarily be an American flag ship to drop off goods and materials here in Hawaii?
So, in this economy where we have so many external factors that determine our health, we've got the military and whether there'll be a big budget for military or not. We've got tourism, and so we've got the markets, whether they are in Japan or China, fluctuating all the time. And we've got our own federal laws. How do you build a robust economy where there are these external factors we have to struggle with? I think even more than most other states do.
Definitely. We've got a lot more challenges than most the other 48 contiguous states, ourselves as well as Alaska. But you know, for us who born and raised and are multi-generations been here, we got nowhere else to go. So it's been a life, probably will continue to be a lifetime of advocating for changes.
Do you think the fact that, as you put it, we have nowhere else to go, the fact that so many of us don't conceive of leaving Hawaii, and we have good and long-term reasons to be here, do you think that creates a kind of a malaise, a kind of satisfaction with the way things are, so that we don't rise up and we don't...
I think some people just give up the fight. You know, and you know, I haven't, and I try to take it on in different ways. I mean, our talents and skill sets are housing, so that's one facet that we can make our contributions to make Hawaii a better place, so that people don't have to leave Hawaii, and so we continue to do that part.
I know that there's an issue that you've been monitoring because you are from the island of Maui. Maui Memorial Hospital and the two other hospitals are part of the state system, and they were actually literally bankrupt, except for the fact we'd hid that by pouring more tax dollars in each year. And now the legislature and the governor have signed off on allowing Maui's hospitals to privatize their labor. What are your thoughts about that?
I've always advocated that we need to somehow privatize or do something with our state hospital system.
At least a public-private partnership.
Correct. We need to do a public-private partnership. My concern today, though, is that having Kaiser, who already has a very large establishment and presence on Maui, that in order to have some balance there, that either Queens Health Systems or Kapiolani, Hawaii Pacific Health, would be successful in operating Maui Memorial Hospital, so that you would have some competition. My concern today is with Kaiser being awarded the contract, what is that going to do for the people of Maui in their choices?
So you are an advocate of free market competition.
Absolutely.
Well, what is good about free market competition? And what's the problem when there are these monopolies in place?
Because it'll cause competition. It benefits, the consumers will benefit by the free market system. I mean, it's been going on for thousands of years. And so when you impede on that free market, I don't see the good that'll come out of it. You know, people will make decisions based on free enterprise.
What did you think?
Goods and services, you know, competition is
That's
healthy.
right. Well, that's good, and I'm glad you say that, because that's what we believe at the Grassroots Institute, that freer markets give people more choices, and they ultimately improve the competitors.
Absolutely.
You've had some pretty tough competitors in your life.
Sure. I love competition. It's great.
They've only made you stronger.
If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger.
Stanford, on that note, let's build Hawaii into a stronger place as well. Thank you for being with me
Thank
today.
you for having me.
It's been a delight to talk with Stanford Carr, President and CEO of Stanford Carr Development, about the perspectives he has as a developer who has a free market heart and yet also a heart for the least advantaged in society. This is Keli'i Akina, President of the Grassroots Institute, wishing you a Halekauwila. Let's work together, build a better government, society, and economy. Until next time, on ThinkTech Hawaii, aloha.